The Thunderbolts comic right now is the best it's ever been. I think it's better than the Warren Ellis run. But this initially opens up with Bucky Barnes catching up to Contessa Valentina. And of course, they pull guns on each other. Now, initially, Contessa thinks that Bucky's going to kill her. And it makes sense, right? Bucky is a killer of killers. Now, Contessa, despite how she may appear in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in the comics, she's a boss. Dude, she would kill Bucky and not think twice about it. And she says that. I'll put a bullet in your head and keep your fancy arm as a trophy. And she'll do it. Right, she's amazing in Marvel Comics, but that's where Bucky tells her, no, I've basically cleaned house, or at least followed up on all the leads regarding the Outer Circle, the organization that you initially built Ox for. Now, of course, she doesn't really go into detail about what Ox is, and we never really even learn per se, but a lot of what Bucky's talking about took place in something called Captain America Finale, and while we don't need to talk about a lot of what happens in that comic, one of the things that is established by Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly, the ones who wrote this story, is something called the Outer Circle. So the Outer Circle was created by a guy named Fortuna, and the idea was that after World War I, humanity just wasn't fit to govern itself. That humanity will go through these kind of ups and downs, right? That there'll be these great eras of economic proliferation, and then humanity will quite literally F around and find out, and they'll screw it all up. It happens every some odd period of time. And so because of that inconsistency, humanity needs to be governed by some organization, even if it's behind the scenes, and the illusion of self-governance needs to be created. And that's what the Outer Circle was. Now, within Captain America Finale, the Outer Circle is basically defunct, right? All those guys are dead or gone. And that's what Bucky tells her, right? Like the ones that you built Ox for, they're all dead and gone, right? There really is no thing here anymore. But he tells her, I'm not here for revenge or to destroy what you've built. Quite the opposite, actually. I've got a new kind of mission, and I want a partner. Now, this is cool, right? It's something that you don't traditionally see. Normally, the Thunderbolts are assembled and formed by some third party, and the context of that is relative to whatever's going on in Marvel Comics at the time, right? The original formation of the Thunderbolts under Zemo bringing the Thunderbolts back during Civil War as a group of basically villains trying to redeem themselves by working on behalf of Iron Man. You had the Jeff Parker era of Thunderbolts, which was pretty dope when they fought the Avengers. Kind of, but not really. But the Avengers were trying to basically rehabilitate them and turn villains into heroes. So they usually kind of have various purposes and they're assembled under various circumstances. In this particular instance, you don't necessarily get that. Instead, what you're getting here is Bucky Barnes forming it for a mission that he's developed. And that's why he tells her this is an invitation to the table, a way to use Ox for something worthy, recruit allies, identify threat vectors. Help me plan a foolproof worldwide operation to permanently stop a target we both know has been under the protection of history for far too long. And so at that point, Contessa's like, okay, well, if you're not here to kill me and you want to kill some bad guys, sure, we can work together. I'm totally down for that. And so 72 hours later, you pick up in Argentina and you pick up with Sharon Carter. Now, Sharon Carter kind of moving away from just being Agent 13, the girl that ultimately was tricked into killing Captain America, to the person that she is now, is pretty dope. A lot of that took place in Captain America Volume 9, but basically she is just kind of out there in almost a kind of blend between like a freedom fighter, vigilante, somebody following Captain America's ideals in some capacity. And that's why when she shows up here to the remnants of a Hydra base, she immediately starts killing everyone that she can find. But what's kind of nuts here is that she was kind of sent on this mission by Barnes and Contessa, right? Telling her this is where Hydras hold out, or at least one of their holdout spots. Go in there, take them out, we'll deal with them, and that'll be it. And so at that point, the question becomes, why did we even attack this base in the first place? Was it really just a Hydra holdout? And the answer is, no, there's something much bigger at foot here. The Red Skull is operating out of this place. Now, here's something to clean up when it comes to the Red Skull. And a lot of people get really, really confused by this, and it makes perfect sense. So a lot of you guys are probably familiar with the Death of Captain America storyline, Captain America Volume 5 from Ed Brubaker, which brought back the Winter Soldier. It's largely considered to be one of the best Captain America runs. There was a guy there named Alexander Lukin. And Alexander Lukin was kind of the return of the Red Skull indirectly, in the sense that the Red Skull was ultimately defeated. But as a last-ditch effort to keep himself alive, he put his consciousness into the body of Alexander Lukin. And so for a time, right, specifically in Captain America Volume 5, issues 11 and 12, and then a lot of the run that transpired with Ed Brubaker, you saw Alexander Lukin and the Red Skull basically vying for control of Alexander Lucan's body. It's also why, if you go and you read the Death of Captain America storyline, that outside of everything with Dr. Faustus, you see Lucan kind of looking in the mirror and seeing the Red Skull, or something along those lines, because it's really them fighting for control. And at this point in time, the Red Skull had won out. So the Red Skull personality controls Lucan. And that's the reason why, once you have like these guys who were initially defeated, right, these kind of exterior forces, and that Contessa, who actually turns out to be a life model decoy, alongside Bucky and Sharon get inside the facility where the Red Skull is, that Bucky Barnes starts making statements like, take your mask off, and so on and so forth. The cool thing about all this is that in the middle of this whole situation, Red Guardian shows up, right? A member of the Winter Guard. And a little bit of a history here, right? A little bit of information for you guys. This probably would have been Colossus. And the reason why in Marvel Comics is that the Winter Guard and a lot of those Soviet-era superhero teams that exist in Marvel, that was the result of the Soviet Union traveling around the country and basically conscripting different superheroes into effectively superhero teams. That Colossus was rescued by Xavier before that happened, but had that not happened, he likely would have been Red Guardian, right? Given his powers and so on and so forth, he would have kind of been the champion of the people, so to speak. So just a little bit of history there, right? When it comes to like Russian superhero teams and how superhero teams formed around the world, Big Hero 6 and things like that, it's really fascinating in Marvel Comics, but we don't want to get sidetracked too much. And so what this does, of course, is you basically have Red Guardian unofficially joining the Thunderbolts. And in fact, he goes so far as to say that, like, he got this information from a third party. Specifically, he got it from White Widow. Now, a lot of you guys know White Widow as Yelena, but at this point, she more or less is under the, I guess, payroll of Contessa, if we want to use that phrase. And so in effect, Contessa slipped information to White Widow, who in turn slipped it to Red Guardian, and that's why Red Guardian's here. That it's quote-unquote a coincidence, but not really. Because at that point, you more or less have half the Thunderbolts roster formed right here. And of course, they end up confronting Alexander Lucan directly. Now again, because of the fact that it's Red Skull, or the Red Skull persona that's operating here, it does offer a lot of banter, but one of the other things to know is that while Red Skull has all kinds of capabilities and so on and so forth, he's usually at his deadliest when he's cornered. Red Skull is one of the deadliest villains in all of Marvel Comics, but he's also the guy that every villain in Marvel Comics hates. Every hero and every villain despises this guy, and no one will work with him in any capacity whatsoever. And so that's why he's kind of backed into a corner here. There are no allies. There's no one coming to his aid. There's no masters of evil who are going to save him or anything like that. But understand, he is also incredibly capable. And so seemingly in one fell swoop, he takes out pretty much all the Thunderbolts. Not a super start for this team. To get dominated in your first outing, that kinda sucks. Now, of course, Bucky manages to get the upper hand momentarily, and then uses the shield of Red Guardian to overcome Alexander Lucan, and then he kills him. And that's one of the crazy things that goes on here, is because what he does is he taunts Bucky. He says, "This is so familiar. Lucan once ordered you to kill me, which only brought about my inevitable rise. Do you think that this will be any different? You have always been a puppet to me, to the Circle, even to Steve Rogers, though enjoy you perhaps having his hand up your..." And you can kind of figure out where it goes from there. And so in turn, he's just like, one last shot, just for me. And he's like, "I see you, my Winter Soldier." And that's where Bucky looks at him. And he says, "I want you to know, everything you've built, we're going to burn it to ash. And when you do come back, whatever meat suit you decide to ride into for your next Fourth Reich, know this. This is not the last shot in our war, Red Skull. This is the first." And that's a very important statement to make. It's also one of the coolest things about Bucky Barnes. He has no qualms killing people. Right? I mean, one of the things to remember, Ed Brubaker totally changed the history of Bucky when he gave us Captain America Volume 5. Up until that point, Bucky Barnes was the sidekick of Captain America. He was a kid who just wandered into the tent when Steve Rogers was changing into his Captain America uniform, and then he's like, "Well, if you don't let me be your sidekick, I'm going to tell everybody." When Ed Brubaker came along, he was like, no. When Bucky was younger, when he was like a teenager, he was taught to kill. He was taught to do all the things that Captain America just wouldn't do. Torture, kill, whatever it had to be. So Bucky, ever since his youngest and most formidable years, has been trained to kill virtually any and every target that he comes across, and to do it without mercy. And so at that point, he takes the cask of Red Guardian, makes a kind of makeshift Molotov cocktail, throws it into the castle, and burns the whole place down, and they all walk out. But while all that's going on, down in the basement of a building somewhere is a guy with a red face. And he says 80 years, 80 long years in the dark. Time has never moved faster or been so unjust to one so noble. This world has forgotten the terror of the skull. It has for too long bowed to a pretender, an echo, a mask. They think they can end me, but they will finally learn to understand I am the end. Because understand here, in the history of Marvel, there were two types of Red Skull, right? There was the Alexander Lukin Red Skull, then there was the real Red Skull. And Johann Schmidt, when you really got past all the theatrics and everything, there's a reason why nobody wanted to work with him. Number one, this guy was just straight up villainous and tied to the old World War II German propaganda. But this guy was also sadistic on a whole different level. It was crazy the kind of stuff that he would do and the lengths that he would go to. Way more than most other villains would get involved in. And so at that point, you pick back up with Bucky and the Thunderbolts as he's basically debriefed on what his new mission is going to be, right? And he's told, so here's the bad news, Bucky Barnes. You're going to a party. Luckily, this party is filled with people that you hate, so you can maintain your stoic brood and fit right in. Before you put a bullet in him, the Red Skull was the 8th wealthiest man on the planet. Tonight, his entire fortune changes hands through the vault of a trusted independent broker at a very exclusive club. For most of you hero types, an invite would be impossible, but luckily we keep bad company and your reputation has only gotten worse. They still think that you're a supervillain out there, so we're going to use that to our own ends. Now, this is one of the other cool things that goes on because this doesn't take place in Madripoor, this takes place in New York City. Now, there's all kinds of meeting grounds like this in the world of Marvel Comics. You see them all over the place in different areas. They're usually held underground, they're held in places where superheroes cannot gain access. Madripoor is a little bit different because of the fact that the laws of Madripoor are so different and it's its own sovereign nation. You don't really see S.H.I.E.L.D. or the superheroes go there because if you're Captain America and you roll into Madripoor, right, this ends now, they're going to kill you. And there's nothing anyone can do to stop them because the laws are totally different out there. So again, it's kind of different circumstances and so on and so forth. Now, the other thing that happens here, and this is probably the most important part of the story, is that Bucky Barnes walks in and he's got Yelena on one arm and Natasha on the other. And I think it's important to just specify here that this really is one of the secret powers of Bucky Barnes. The Riz! This dude's got game! And it makes perfect sense, right? But when they get in here, it is very much a kind of Mission Impossible type scenario, right? That initially you have Yelena who's just like, I already hate this place. Please tell me that you brought those beautiful big explosives of yours, Natasha. And her response, I brought a lot more than that, Yelena. You just wait. And again, Bucky kind of chimes in and he says, don't wait that long. At least 75% of the people in this room have tried to kill me. So, we need to be on our guard. But a lot of it's kind of on the lookout, right? For the briefcase or whatever the artifact is that they're there to essentially steal. And that's when all the lights go out. And we end up learning they're at the Hellfire Club. Not only that, Wilson Fisk is the White King of the Hellfire Club. Now, it's important to specify all this stuff comes out of things like the fall of X, right? The end of the Krakoa age and so on and so forth. So again, to provide a little bit of context here, when Krakoa started to go belly up, right? When humanity started launching its attack against Krakoa and Orcus was launching its attack and it was obvious the end was nigh, there were a few things that started happening. Number one, mutants were stripped of all their rights, right? So they lost the ability to hold bank accounts, different things like that. Those accounts were seized by different governments and so on. So that's why Tony Stark married Emma Frost, because what it would do is it would allow her to transfer all of her money to Tony Stark. And because they're partners and because Tony Stark is a human, there's no reason for Orcus and them to go after Tony directly. Plus, he's too high profile, right? It would make too big of a deal to start attacking humans. One of the other things that happened is that Wilson Fisk became the White King of the Hellfire Club. Now, technically that had already happened, but as the White King of the Hellfire Club, it allowed Wilson Fisk to operate a kind of underground railroad, so to speak, right? In the sense that because the Hellfire Club is such an exclusive organization, and because it exists to influence the world behind the scenes, they have enough money to smooth over a lot of different things. And so in essence, he could help mutants transport from one location to another. He could provide arms and armament they couldn't readily get on their own. He was a vast and incredible resource to have on their side. And then Devil's Reign happened, and he tried to ban superheroes in New York. But still, right? At this point, he says, we observe this particular event every Friday night, but the unique nature of tonight's gathering cannot be ignored. After all, the Red Skull is dead. So it is with great solemnity that I remind you that the Hellfire Club does not tolerate genocidal fascists, nor do we tolerate the use of National Socialist imagery. There will be no toast to the madman of the Rhine. Tonight, we celebrate the living. And so at that point, that's when the Thunderbolts realize, so Wilson Fisk is the one receiving the funds of the Red Skull. But why? I mean, did you just kind of set it up that way? Like, what in the world's going on? Not only that, they realized that the transfer process, right, the briefcase, so to speak, as it was being referred to, the item they're supposed to steal, is not that simple. It's actually inside Vast, the living vault. Now, this guy is a really cool character in Marvel. I mean, technically, this is like his first appearance and his only appearance in Marvel, but the concept behind it is fantastic. As a living vault, his interior is essentially an endless space. Not that dissimilar from like the bag that Hermione carried around in Harry Potter. And the idea is you can store anything in there. And so what ends up happening is that the Thunderbolts are informed who this guy is, right? Please be advised, that's a pocket dimension in his ribcage. Only one rule with Vast. Whatever goes in, only he can take out. He's pretty big in Europe, and Ox has used him for some of our more exciting transfers. So again, he's kind of shopped around. But that's when you're kind of brought back to what's going on here, where Wilson Fisk addresses everybody, and he says, so, with those caveats out of the way, I invite you to enjoy your stay in these August halls. Once the purview of the world's elite, then a harbor for ascendant mutants. Now yours, but more specifically, mine. So I leave you with one final paramount warning. If anyone here attempts any measure of larceny, subterfuge, or murder in these halls tonight that has not been specifically permitted by your White King, I will savor every moment as I crush the life from your heart. And people know you do not cross Wilson Fisk. Only a fool does that. Woe betide the poor soul that pisses this guy off, because it'll be the last thing that you ever do. But Bucky despises him, mostly because of the fact that Wilson Fisk almost beat him to death. That actually took place in the Devil's Reign Winter Soldier one-shot, where Bucky was kind of on a mission doing his own thing. But the fact is, Kingpin scares the heck out of him, because Kingpin is as cold as he is ruthless. Now, of course, this also allows Natasha the opportunity to don her symbiote, which is actually what her dress has been the entire time. That took place in the more recent Venom run. I do have a playlist for it if you're interested in checking that out. The only thing that really matters here is she has all the capabilities that you would traditionally expect someone with a symbiote to have, right? You're being able to swing by makeshift webbings and enhanced durability and shapeshifting and yada, yada, yada. But again, that's when the entire plan starts to go sideways, because Wilson Fisk is notified that with Yelena being here and with Natasha being here, there's widows in the building. And when there's widows, there's either thievery or there's assassinations. Either way, none of them bode well for Wilson Fisk. Not only that, because of everything that's going on, Bucky Barnes kind of makes it a bit of a vendetta. He says, the skull, it was me. I'm the one who killed him. And he says, whoever you're holding this money for, whatever remnants of Skull's operation that you're giving your 10%, I'm going to bring double the pain down on you and your little fetish party here. That's a promise. And that's where Wilson Fisk kind of taunts him, like, remnants. You really have no idea what's going on here, do you? You think it's the remnants of the Red Skull's empire. And so at that point, he's like, you killed Lucan, and immediately attacks him, right? He's like, the skull still lives. And he's like, let those words be a reminder of your futility as you are beaten to death. Now, if you'll excuse me, Mr. Barnes, there are thieves in my house, and so I have a promise to keep. Esteemed members of the Hellfire Club, It's time for you to earn your privilege. And this dude is met with knives and guns of all different sorts. And you know what Bucky does? He doesn't care. That's exactly what Bucky does. His care goes away. This guy manhandles them all. Now, again, he doesn't kill everybody, right? Bucky Barnes just bails out, right? Goes up the elevator shaft and immediately makes his escape. And so at that point, you pick up with Yelena and Black Widow, who get up to where you have Vast kind of quote unquote emptying his vault. And that's when she says, right? Nice shtick though, we'll remember you fondly. The response of Kingpin, a fitting quip from those who are about to die, is I will ensure that no one remembers either of you. And so with Bucky Barnes showing back up here, a fight breaks out between all of them. Now, it's not the most significant fight there ever was, and you wouldn't really expect it to be. I mean, it is only Wilson Fisk, but it does allow Natasha the opportunity to enter inside the vault of Vast. And inside this vault is all the gold and riches that belong to the Red Skull. This is every ounce of wealth he's ever accumulated over the course of his entire life, and it's all being held. And so, of course, this leads to Yelena talking to Vast and saying, so there is somebody who's inside of you, and you should get them out of there. Initially, it makes it look like she's a betrayer, like she's turning against the team, which is not the case at all, because, of course, Vast grabs her and brings her out, because remember, the only thing that can be taken out of Vast once it's in there is whatever Vast takes out himself. And so that's why the Thunderbolts momentarily get the upper hand on Wilson Fisk. They kind of knock him back to the side a little bit, and then they make their escape. Because what had happened is that where Wilson Fisk was speaking with Vast, and he's like, I thought you said that once something was in you, it could never be taken out. He's like, that's not what happened. They left something there. It turned out to be an explosive. And Black Widow blows the thing to pieces. And then you get just this amazing line from Bucky where he tells Fisk, he's like, the next time you hear thunder, Wilson, stay the hell out of the lightning, and just bails. Just immediately takes off. And so following that, and with us actually learning that him and Natasha are having a relationship together, so that probably makes him the luckiest man in the entirety of the Marvel Universe, that this leads to him having a conversation with Contessa. And she tells him, right, good news, Ox has been on a worldwide audit of Skull's red sites, but after today, we've got all of them starved for cash and on the run. The bad news, I'm only really seeing one vector of chatter that could be our new Red Skull. One last red site, entirely hidden and out of our control. In 48 hours, assets inside the US government are going to strike the site off the map, presumably covering Skull's tracks as he re-enters the world and starts a dangerous war in the process. And that's where Bucky's like, well, then we get there first. And Contessa's like, yeah, that's the thing though, good luck with that. And he's like, why? Where's the site? And she's like, oh, just a little mountain country in Eastern Europe, lederhosen, great beer, and an iron-fisted magical dictator with an infamous zero-tolerance policy on foreign intervention. And Bucky's like, oh my God. And she's like, that's right. The Red Skull is in Latveria. Probably the worst case scenario for them to be in. But at that point, what you actually end up doing is picking up with the Thunderbolts, intercepting the mission that's supposed to go to Latveria. Specifically, you pick up with Shang-Chi and John Walker. So you could see the Thunderbolts roster forming here, and the one that's almost identical to what you see in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And initially there's a little bit of a back and forth there, right? By this point in time, Shang-Chi's been recruited to the Thunderbolts. Technically happened off panel, but he's officially part of the team. And it's one of these things where it's just kind of like, okay, keep John Walker talking, right? His ego is the one thing that he loves the most. We will get information out of him on what's happening and how all this is supposed to transpire. But that's when you realize it's not just John Walker by himself, it's also John Walker and Todd Ziller. Now, a lot of you guys may not know who Todd Ziller is, and that's fine, because Shang-Chi is just kind of basically playing a distraction for John Walker, effectively starting a fight. The real target here is Todd Ziller himself, that when Bucky Barnes gets there, he's like, Ziller, you need to come with me. And Ziller just says, absolutely not. But then this program overrides, and the Red Skull says, authorization, Weltfuhrer, program, troubleshooter. Protocol Omega, remove safety protocols and begin immediately. And that is literally when Todd Ziller starts to fire up. Why? Because Todd Ziller is the result of what happens when the US government uses a combination of things like PIM particles and Kirk Connor's lizard formula, along with a few other goodies, in an attempt to create a new super soldier. They create American Kaiju. Basically Godzilla. in Marvel Comics, right? It's amazing because he just morphs into this gigantic critter and just starts tearing the city apart. Now, initially, he's kind of in an animalistic state, and Shang-Chi tells, Bucky Barnes, you got to fire the shot. You got to take this guy out. Everybody's kind of telling him that. But Todd Ziller is the partner of John Walker. So Bucky says, I understand what it means to have a partner. I'm going to give this guy one chance. The problem is that missiles are scrambling in response to this. And so literally they fire a missile off on Todd Ziller, which is not enough to bring him down, but it is enough for Shang-Chi to make the statement and saying, look, here's a problem, right? This guy is a gigantic lizard. We need something of equal capability to take this guy out. So he hands Bucky Barnes one of his rings, which turns Bucky Barnes into a giant. And so literally, you got a gigantic Bucky Barnes fighting American Kaiju, and it is amazing. But again, it's designed to kind of bring him down, right? It's designed to sort of calm him down to a degree, because in that moment, there's this statement made by literally everyone, you need to kill him, right? Kill him and do it now. But it kind of reminds Bucky that every life is worth saving, even those lives that seem like they're not. And so in turn, he doesn't kill him. And in fact, he's actually hit with the shield of John Walker, who's like, don't kill my friend. And so Bucky just kind of knocks American Kaiju unconscious, and then in turn goes to talk to John Walker for a minute. And it's one of these things where Walker's brought onto the Thunderbolts directly. The reason being because Walker didn't really believe that Red Skull was back, or that Red Skull was operating behind the scenes to manipulate any and all of these situations. But at the end of the day, because of what happened with Todd Ziller, because he was activated remotely by the Red Skull, the proof is in the pudding. And because of the fact that John Walker is just this crazed patriot, right? Almost as bad as like Frank Simpson Nuke, and refused to hear anything against like fascism and so on and so forth, which is a good policy to have. He joins the Thunderbolts, becomes a part of the team, and in turn, they launch their attack against Latveria. Now, here's the funny thing about this, right? That Dr. Doom contacts them, and he says, Doom has been watching you, Bucky Barnes, ever since your gift of the Fortunov survivor, who's provided us many hours of cathartic amusement, but there is no amount of gratitude that can make a fool of Doom. Your clandestine missive is both unconvincing in its evidence and insulting in its implication. Latveria neither harbors the Red Skull, nor has her sovereignty been breached by such vermin as him. This contingency vault that you claim he's built here is a fantasy. Furthermore, your attempts to manipulate Doom into opening long closed borders to your cell of errant weapons of war is transparent. Your request for operational freedom in Doom's airspace is denied. Know that if you make any attempt to infiltrate Latveria, the only thing left of your so-called revolution within 10 minutes of detection will be ashes. And so, of course, in response to this declaration, the Thunderbolts do the most reasonable thing. They invade anyway. And it's kind of amazing how it goes down, because they immediately attack this site. Now, here's one of the kickers about this, right? It's all buried underground. And so once they get down here, they come face to face with the Red Skull. And it's amazing how this whole thing happens, right? Hello, my precious Thunderbolts. You are so cordially welcome. Behold what I have done with 80 years of imagination, unseen by the so-called gods of your century. And, of course, the ever-ignorant Doom. Witness the seeds of genocide before they grow into a world tree of purity. Come and see, for you have faced the shadow of hatred so many times, little soldiers, but now you face her master. It's one of the most amazing lines ever. But Bucky Barnes is not daunted by this, right? Because keep in mind, they have 10 minutes. Right, 10 minutes here before Doom realizes they're there and Doom shows up. And so it's like Doom minus 6 minutes. The clock is counting down. Now they all fire their shots, right? They all take him out every way they can. And even leaving out all the various forces that the Red Skull has at his command, you are talking about a guy who is every bit the fighter and the strategist as Captain America. So it's like fighting an evil Captain America, who's technically a guy named Steve-O. But again, it's dope because he gets the upper hand on virtually all of them. And there's so little they can do to defeat this guy. It's no small feat. But Bucky Barnes is not fighting irrationally. Bucky Barnes is fighting with passion. He's fighting with vigor. He wants to win and destroy this guy, except he doesn't, right? If anything, he taunts Red Skull this whole time, right? Red Skull taunts him in turn, and he says, "Are you ready to die, child? Are you prepared for the pain that you've earned?" And the response of Bucky, "Pain does not scare me, Skull. I'm not the kid that you remember, not by a long shot." And Skull says, "No, that child was clever, courageous. You are simply his walking corpse. Finally come home for burial." But again, Bucky's right back on this guy again. And it's like back and forth and back and forth. And at that point, that's when Red Guardian looks at him and is like, "Okay, so like, are we at the final point now? Like the final part? Like are we at the final part of the plan?" And literally, Bucky's just like, "Run." Right? And so he makes this almost kind of speech to Red Skull where he says, "You're the corpse, Skull, thriving in darkness. I know exactly what that's like. Maybe it's time that we stepped into the light." And Red Skull's response, little speeches, trite lessons about light and dark. "Is that all you have left, Barnes?" And the response of Bucky, "You and your kind tried to make me an assassin. You're lone wolf, too isolated to ever truly take you down. But I've learned a little something from your playbook along the way. I took your secrets, your money, your levels of power, and I found your last hiding place. Hell, Schmidt, how thick are you? Did you really think my friends and I were trying to beat you in a boxing match? No. We were just waiting for the locals." Now, what does that mean, right? It's a really, really cool moment from the story, and I wanted to wait to this specific moment to tell this. So when they were initially making this invasion, right, Bucky Barnes talks to Natasha and he's like, "Did I ever tell you about the Deutschmarks?" And she's like, "No, like I've never heard that story." And the response of Bucky, "So we're in the Rhine, November 1944. Steve, Dugan, myself, and a whole platoon of GIs march on Castle Zemo. Heinrich goes ahead and locks his drawbridge, leaves his people to starve. We spend a week trying to get in, but nothing works. We're stuck waiting on him. The locals are all welcoming. Up to a point. They aren't going to try to kill us in our sleep out of loyalty to the guy who's in the high castle." And so we have this guy in this platoon, goes by the name Chick, ex-boxer, real artistic. He and Steve get on like pork and beans. So Chick finds out that they've got this beer house and drags me and Steve out to it. And he's like, "I was a little young for it, but you know, whatever." That's just the way that it is. And he's like, "But even the bartender says, you're a little too young to drink here. I'm not going to serve you guys." And we even offer to pay, but the guy only knows 3 words in English. No dollars, Deutschmarks. And so he says Steve just tries to shrug it off, but Chick starts noticing that there's not a single Deutschmark in the entire town, that Zemo's taken everything and hoarded it in a vault near the castle. The bastard even leaves the vault right there where everyone could see, so they could fear him, bring him tribute. These people have nothing, and Zemo thinks it makes him untouchable. And he says, "So I blow the vault. Chick, Steve, and I, we take every scrap of treasure we can back to the bar, and the whole town drinks on Zemo for a week, until they all chased him out of that damn castle themselves, chanting the same thing over and over again. No dollars, Deutschmarks." And so that was the point that Bucky was making, that it takes a lot of bravery for locals to stand up to a tyrannical ruler. And so that kind of brings us back to this moment when he had told Red Guardian to jump out of the way, right? That he was basically offering this some measure of a distraction, because that's why he says, "We're not challenging you to a boxing match. We were waiting for the locals." He says, Deutschmarks. And immediately, when this hole opens, Dr. Doom appears and immediately disintegrates the Red Skull, right? Just kills him on the spot. And that's it, right? This guy is done, gone, and dead. And so at that point, Dr. Doom actually hacks Contessa, right? And just kind of like broadcasts to everybody. And it's just like, what you've done here is a severe mistake. And you will be made to pay for this mistake. Believe me, that is going to happen. You will be made to suffer. But the response of Bucky is, "No, you're not going to do that, because you're a part of the team. You saved us. So Dr. Doom, you're a Thunderbolt now." Which is pretty amazing. Now, following this, the team just kind of bands together for a drinking session, after everybody's defeated and the day saved. And that's where Bucky asked the question, who's next, right? Who do they go after in the world who's a large and credible threat? What's wild about this is all this takes place right before the events of One World Under Doom. So right now, Thunderbolts is a Doomstrike comic that's a tie-in to the One World Under Doom event. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.